What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about if Ethan will return in the Shadows of Rose DLC. The release is in just a few weeks. Now, there's two different kind of parts to this I want to talk about. Some of the more practical reasons why I think Ethan is going to return, which would include looking at the ending of Village, as well as kind of the description of what the story of the Shadows of Rose DLC is, but also kind of taking a few steps back, more of like the choice of doing the DLC in the first place. And I want to start there. So for those that don't know, I actually made a video covering it, but they did confirm, they said out loud, the team behind it, that this is going to end the Winters family saga. This ends their arc. And I personally am not a huge fan of ending the Winters storyline on DLC. I have seen people that agree with my line of thinking. In a way, you could argue, in fact, you probably can argue, that Resident Evil Village was, it says at the end, the father's journey is now complete and all that. So, and they didn't plan on making DLC. This was kind of an off-the-cuff situation. So it could be argued that they looked at Village and said, we're going to end Mia, Rose, Ethan, all of them. We're ending them in the second game in the trilogy, and then the third game maybe follows Chris or whatever, but we're going to end it here. So in a way, we do get more now than we would have, right? So I guess there's like an extra conclusion to the family, but that is one of the reasons. So, I mean, looking at that specific argument, this obviously is Rose and Rose's story, but because of the mold, because that's part of the story of this, of her tale here, I do think that's going to involve Ethan, and I do think Ethan, it makes sense to bring him back, considering he is the character we played as, for these two games. And if you're going to end the story, I'm not saying you need all of them like holding hands at the end, right? Like the three of them, but to have Mia in it for like a cameo, to have this mainly be Rose's story, and then to probably end it on some sort of dialogue conversation with Ethan, which is how I think this game is going to end. And then in terms of the actual story and its connection to Rose, the story of this 4-hour DLC is described as her trying to get rid of her powers, and by doing so, she ends up seeing all the humans that the mold has come into contact with. Now again, that's Ethan to me, at least one of them, it would be Ethan. Also, you look at, and I'm going to stay very, very strong on this, and I have seen this continue to appear in really any articles talking about this. You look to the end of Village, and there still is that theory, including my own, I do believe that that is the case, that is Ethan at the end of Village that walks to her car. And remember, people were able to, not like hack into it, but people were able to zoom in, zoom out of that scene, and that was Ethan's body. Now, they could use his body and have it be somebody else, considering you're supposed to see it from far away, right? You're not supposed to see it close up, so they could just be reusing assets. It definitely makes it a little bit more interesting, right? But I do believe that is him. I believe because of the connection, and if you want to include the mold, I mean, I guess maybe even the connection with the mold, I do think it's very, very possible he's able to at least talk to her, talk to Rose, if not be able to basically materialize and come and spend some time with her and then leave. I know there was like a theory that maybe he can just be brought back from the dead in general. I think just because it's going to be maybe a lot of hallucinations or a lot of her seeing things that really only because she is herself she's able to see. I don't think Ethan would come back from the dead, but I do think because of the ending of Village, because of seemingly what the story is here, that Rose is going to be able to hear him, so I do think we'll get some dialogue from him, and then potentially see him, and maybe it's not a coincidence, right? You can maybe look into this, that this is part of the DLC, but the DLC is more than just this small 4-hour thing, right? There's also the third person, and while we all knew for quite a while now what Ethan looks like, it is interesting to me, if you go down this line of thinking, that so when Shadows of Rose comes out, there's the third person mode for Village, so anybody that didn't know, I guess, what Ethan looks like now would, and then considering you're playing the Shadows of Rose DLC as Rose, and it is third person, right? That's just the feature of it. If you were to see Ethan, it would be the first time that kind of, line of dialogue would ever happen where you'd be the camera would pick him up in that way. But it'd be simultaneously the first time you'd see him that way, because you could also see him like that if you just replay Village in the third person mode. So maybe they did that in almost a subtle way where it's like, well, we're gonna have him show up in the Shadows of Rose DLC, but we're gonna have to show his face, or at least like his head, the back of his head. And so the best way of maybe getting people used to that is by putting a third person mode. I mean, it's definitely a reach, and I do think people just want a third person mode in general, but there could be other reasons, is basically all I'm saying. So I do think he'll be back. I think it makes sense for the story to wrap up the Winters saga. I mean, you kind of need, in my opinion, you would need more than one. At the very least, that means Mia, right? Because can you end Rose, but then you just kind of like leave Mia out there? So I do think there'll be some sort of cameo with her, and I do think one more time we'll see or hear or both of Ethan, and then he'll get to say his goodbye as well. He did say his goodbye, but they were never able to talk because she was a baby, right? And if he is able to appear to her, well, then they could talk all the time. So we'll see how they kind of do that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on so you know all of these videos go up. I will be covering this game when it releases, so I'll do some discussions on the story, I guess, and what happens with it. So you can definitely look out for videos there. If you want to follow or support me anywhere else, all my social media is in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.